There are many swordsmen in the world of One Piece, and today we'll be ranking them to see who is truly the strongest swordsman in One Piece. Kicking off our list, we have Vice Admiral Momonga. Now, there's not much known about this dude besides his participation in the Enies Lobby Buster Call. Considering his position in the Marines, though, he's at a decent level when it comes to strength, and it was definitely shown when he was able to resist Hancock's Devil Fruit abilities to some degree. However, if you thought the Marines had no swordsmen, our next entry might even give Zoro a run for his money in the future. Given the amount of screen time Tashigi has been given throughout the years, it's not going to be surprising when Oda finally decides to give her more in the coming arcs. When you stop and consider her progress from Logtown to Punk Hazard, it would be interesting to see her show off some more of her sword skills in the future. After all, you don't see someone casually deflecting a cannonball with the dull side of their sword very often. When it comes to characters who are popular for their good looks, our next entry gives Tashigi some stiff competition. A famous super rookie and a captain in his own right, Cavendish has made waves in the pirate world after his exile from his kingdom. Having a bounty of 330 million without even having eaten a devil fruit, Cavendish solely relies on armament and observation hockey to augment his swordplay. However, his true strength comes from his ability when he's asleep. If he's asleep and his alter ego Hakuba awakens, he transforms into a much faster and more bloodthirsty swordsman. He was once even referred to as a strange wind that cuts people. But if we're going by speed alone, Hakuba would probably take the top spot, provided we get actual numbers from Oda soon. For our next entry, technically the ones on his arms aren't swords, and even when he was Kamazo the Manslayer in Wano, he was using scythes. But when you think about how swords work, it's functionally the same thing. Being the swordsman for the kid pirates, Killer is also part of the worst generation. Killer is the smart one of the group, which helps out in balancing Kid's more aggressive nature. Killer is no slouch in a fight too, with his hockey-infused Scyther Sonic attack. He was able to damage Kaido's internal organs fairly easily. But if you thought the Supernovas were tough, what about a Yonko-approved swordsman? Vista of the Flower Swords is the 5th Division commander in the Whitebeard Pirates. There is very little screen time of Vista in the anime, but considering he was one of the only men that wasn't afraid of Mihawk and was even excited to fight him, just tells you a lot about the kind of pirates in Whitebeard's crew. While the Marineford War had multiple casualties from either side, Vista was one of the people who sustained no significant injuries despite fighting both Mihawk and Akainu in the same war. If you're someone who can style on your enemies by throwing petals on them while fighting them, yeah, you've earned your place in the Yonko's pirate crew. Our next entry, however, gave even Luffy a hard time. Hey, if you thought one swordsman was bad, have you ever thought about fighting 2 or 3? What about 4? Surely Cracker's devil fruit power allows him to make several biscuit swordsmen that he can easily control. With the mastery of a complicated devil fruit, there's no doubt that he deserves his spot as one of the 3 great generals in Big Mom Pirates. While his biscuit soldiers do wield swords, he's not opposed to using them either, although it isn't as pronounced as our next entry. Another one of the sweet generals, Charlotte Smoothie relies a bit on her swordsmanship to use her devil fruit abilities to its full extent. While her already disturbing devil fruit ability allows her to extract smoothies from other living beings by squeezing them, she can also puncture them with her sword to extract juices to power herself up. This results in increased size and strength along with everything else on her, armor and sword included. Considering they've supplied her with slaves for that exact purpose, it's safe to say that she's probably the most disturbing character in all of One Piece, or at least very close to it. Although if it's disturbing and creepy that we're looking for, our next swordsman shows that you can be both and still be likable. The musician and second swordsman of the Straw Hat Pirates is as creepy as they come, and as far as sword skills come, he's had over 90 years to hone them. He's ranked fairly high considering the ones we've mentioned so far, because he's one of the only Straw Hats that's been able to successfully infiltrate a Yonko stronghold and steal a poneglyph print from them. Another thing about my main man Brook is that despite Big Mom's notoriety in the pirate world, he was still confident in fighting her, knowing that he wouldn't die from it because he's already dead. His mastery over ice and soul powers also complements his tremendous speed, as Brook can coat his sword with his devil fruit abilities. His swordsmanship is so strong that he was able to cut off one of the 5 elders of Saturn's limbs in his awakened devil form during the events of Egghead Island. Now that's just cold-blooded if he even had any blood. Our next entry knows a thing or two about losing limbs. As a part of the legendary Azakaya 9, Kikunojo the Fallen Snow was known as one of the toughest samurai in Wano. Of course, most people wouldn't know it with how defenseless she seemed at the start, with the Straw Hats needing to defend her from Kaido's underlings. Little do they know, though, that she was a samurai sent from the past to ensure that the return of the Kozukis would be a successful one. Kiku wouldn't be the only one in the Azakaya 9 that we'll be talking about, though. Kawamatsu, at an early age, got shipwrecked and immediately orphaned in Wano. It was then that Kozuki Odin rescued him from lynching, and ever since, he's been one of the most trusted men that he's ever had. Under the Kozuki banner, Kawamatsu became a skilled swordsman and even ended up as a Yokozuna ranked sumo. With his fishman body, he has the strength of 10 men, which isn't just limited to his limbs. His body is so strong that his mouth muscles are strong enough to use fish bones as projectiles. And that's on top of the fact that he's effectively poisoned throughout his captivity. The only reason he's not higher up on this list is because his body has deteriorated from his imprisonment, and the only thing he had to eat during all that time was poisoned fish. While Kawamatsu underwent severe physical torment over the years, our next entry took over his responsibilities while waiting for Wano's heroes to return. To disguise his true identity from Orochi's men, Denjiro formed a new identity, Kyoshido, to prepare for the return of the Kozuki clan. His new identity, along with his swordsmanship, allowed him to become the boss of the Yakuza and provided a good hiding spot for Hiyori for 13 years. There's no questioning Denjiro's strength when it comes to battle. After all, he was able to deflect Zoro's 720-pound phoenix and was skilled enough to help Hiyori fake her death by cutting a blood bag hidden in her robe. But his true strength comes from his patience and tactical abilities. Organized crime requires a lot of planning and organization, from what I've heard, and Denjiro was able to display that ability during the raid of Onigashima when he successfully led thousands of prisoners from the flower capital when he exploited the authority given to him by Orochi. Moments later, Denjiro was also able to deceive Sasuke, one of the Tobi Roppo, subduing the pirate without any effort. While Denjiro's craftiness is the stuff of legend, his swordsmanship and precision are no joke either. But our next entry might just be craftier and has earned his place as a leader in Wano. As the leader of the Azakaya 9, Kinemon was trusted with the future of Wano along with 3 other samurai and Momonosuke. Despite his weird powers like creating clothes with his devil fruit or his ability to speak by farting, he's a capable leader and commands a great deal of respect and authority from other members of the Azakaya 9. Believe me. However, as strong as he is when it comes to his swordplay, all of it comes from his superhuman strength and endurance. Being able to cut through thick steel, the ability to endure the extreme conditions of Punk Hazard, and resist poisons from both Caesar and polluted meat and fish from Wano, Kinemon's an actual beast and can withstand a lot of physical threats, even ones coming from Kaido himself when he tanked a hit from a Conqueror Haki-infused attack. Along with Denjiro, Kinemon is one of the only people who can emulate Odin's two-sword style. And people say that Kinemon's only lucky. If you thought Kinemon being able to cut through fire was impressive, our next entry makes even an entire building feel like butter. Widely known throughout the world as the Surgeon of Death, this member of the Supernovas became part of the 7 Warlords post-time skip and was recognized for his overpowered devil fruit abilities. Law is what you get if you decide to combine the roles of captain, swordsman, and doctor into one dude, and is largely responsible for taking down Doflamingo and the Yonkos, Big Mom, and Kaido. Law has shown immense power with his devil fruit ability, and it's only further enhanced by his swordplay, showing off feats like slicing an entire building in Punk Hazard and running his sword from a flying castle into the Earth's mantle in seconds. If it wasn't for his performance anxiety during the fight with Doflamingo, we would have ranked him a little higher, unlike our next entry, which would be a problem for Dofi had they met in Impel Down. If you're in charge of a super prison underwater, hosting prisoners so deranged that records of their existence were essentially wiped off the face of the earth, you'd have to be a strong fighter, especially if you don't have any devil fruits backing you up. Initially introduced as the ex-jailer for Impel Down, Shiryu was so violent and murderous even by Impel Down standards that he eventually became one of its inhabitants. Shiryu is as bloodthirsty as they come, and with his jailer privileges, he managed to massacre prisoners within the walls of Impel Down as a hobby. Ruthless and shady, one of Shiryu's impressive feats also includes being one of the only people to successfully stab Garp by tricking him into targeting Kobe during the events of Egghead Island. And while he was already a monster in his own right before the time skip, his newly acquired devil fruit ability grants him invisibility on top of his already blinding speed. If someone like Blackbeard acknowledges Shiryu's strength enough to make him his second in command, our next entry shares the same kind of recognition from another Yonko. For every Yonko, there's a second in command that's close to their power level, and for Kaido, that man is King. With the idea of becoming strong enough to never be slaves again, King set out with Kaido and has been with him for more than 3 decades. Rightfully recognized as a calamity, King can generate a lot of destructive force with his flame abilities from his Lunarian descent, and that's not even talking about his devil fruit and his swordplay. His body alone can withstand most of Zoro's Haki-infused attacks, and considering he wasn't even in his Zoan form at the time, it just shows you how much more he can do. His swordplay has been honed for decades as well, style capable of matching Zoro and would have likely won if Zoro didn't get Conqueror's haki out of nowhere during their fight. If you're someone who's been recognized by a future emperor in your teenage years for your strength, you're bound to be a big deal. And with a bounty in the billions, King deserves his spot on Kaido's side as his right-hand man. And if you thought Kaido's acknowledgement of strength was enough, our next entry got up in his face to get that recognition. Odin is a revered hero in the land of Wano, as he was one of the first people to go against Kaido in hopes of liberating the land. He established peace in Kuri when it was a bandit town, and he was responsible for Goldie Roger reaching Laugh Tale. As wonderful as Odin's legend is, his current status in the anime prevents him from going further up on our list, as he physically can't become a better swordsman. While Odin has been dead for a while and likely won't be able to do much in the anime, our next entry has done a lot in Wano while he was alive and was a huge part of Wano's foreshadowing pre-time skip. If you haven't gone and died and your sword ends up as a country's national treasure because the god of swordsmanship held it, it's safe to say that Ryuma is at the top of Wano's swordsman list. Ryuma's swordplay and haki were so powerful that even in the present day, his sword Shisui was still able to function during his battle with his descendant Zoro, and was even able to match with another famous sword, the Wado Ichimonji. To be fair, it was Brook's shadow controlling Ryuma at this point, but considering Moria thought to resurrect Ryuma's body for it without any forms of augmentation, goes to show you how well deserved his title of sword god was and still is. But I mean, if we're talking about legends in the One Piece world, there's probably not a bigger one than our next entry. Perhaps one of the most important figures in the entire series, Goldie Roger's sword skills aren't exactly as emphasized as others, but considering his cutlass, Ace is his signature weapon, it's safe to say that he's one of the most impactful swordsmen in the One Piece world. While he has been dead for decades now, his sword skills coupled with his haki are still renowned to this day. This is in addition to being one of the only people who can match Whitebeard blow for blow. With his signature move, Divine Departure, Roger can one-shot people with ease, and it's seen when he meets Odin for the first time. And he wasn't even taking it serious. Roger wouldn't be the king of pirates if he wasn't strong enough, but considering he's been gone for decades now, it's safe to say that our upcoming entries would be much stronger. Our next entry has had that amount of time to perfect not only her swordplay, but also everything else really involved. If you can rival Whitebeard, Kaido, and Goldie Roger in their prime, you'd have to be crazy strong, and that's what Big Mom is, emphasis on crazy. See, the main threat when it comes to dealing with Big Mom is her devil fruit, which allows her to control souls and infuse non-living things with the souls that she's collected. However, with her imposing figure, her close quarters combat is just as terrifying. With the size and strength that she has, she can just punch buildings and watch them collapse as she usually does when she's craving something specific. However, one notable thing about Big Mom's combat is that she's usually accompanied by 3 companions or homies, Zeus, Prometheus, and her living sword, Napoleon. If you thought being wailed on by a 29-foot tall woman was bad, imagine hearing her sword trash talk you the whole time, or while you're running for your life. With one-hit KO moves like Ikoku Sovereignty that she just stole from the Giants, Big Mom's big sword equals big impact. Big Mom is one of the heaviest hitters in the One Piece world, but our next entry knows a thing or two about heavy things. Fujitora's Admiral status already tells you how strong of a fighter he is, considering they're the strongest forces in the whole Marines. Not only that, Fujitora got that title as a blind swordsman. Primarily a devil fruit user, Fujitora amps up his swordplay by imbuing his sword with his gravity-manipulating devil fruit powers. Adding to his proficiency in haki control, his sword becomes obsidian black and is even capable of trading blows with the Revolutionary Army's second-in-command, Sabo's flame-imbued staff. There's also the mention of his fast reflexes and dexterity despite being blind in holding his sword in a reverse-style grip. Of course, there's also the matter of his sword, the Yakuza Kazan, being one of the 12 supreme-grade weapons that he uses as a walking cane out of combat. You can talk about Fujitora's gravity powers all you want, but even with just swords play alone, Fujitora deserves his admiral position and his spot this high up. Because you don't need all your vision to be a great swordsman when your haki is just that strong. Our next entry shares the same kind of vision when it comes to his swordplay. Look, we all know Zoro, one-eyed swordsman, been with the crew since the beginning. Having a reputation that basically tells other people that he should be avoided at all costs, Zoro was the first crew member of the Straw Hat Pirates, with him being the only member that Luffy actively looked for. To be the greatest swordsman in the world, Zoro decided in his training that only practicing with 2 swords wasn't going to be enough, so the 3-sword style was born to match his childhood friend's Kuina's swordplay. Zoro was capable of using all 3 forms of haki, and he owns 3 famous swords: the Wada Ichimonji, one of the 21 great grade swords, the Sandai Kitetsu, a cursed sword forged by Kozi Sukiyaki himself, and Enma, originally wielded by Kozuki Odin, and is capable of drawing dangerous amounts of armament haki from the user. As far as feats go, he's the only other person apart from Odin who was able to scar Kaido, but perhaps his most impressive trait is his insane durability. Zoro has survived blows from the toughest of opponents, from Kaido to Mihawk and Pika, and even managed to take all of Luffy's pain from the events of Thriller Bark despite not having the same rubbery body. Even the poison meat from Wano wasn't enough to keep Zoro down, as he was able to eat a lot of those things and only having an upset stomach after. Zoro's title as the King of Hell is well earned, and who knows, maybe one day his new title would be the world's greatest swordsman. Our next entry, however, might just keep that dream at arm's length for him. While most fans would associate Shanks more with his tremendous display of conqueror's haki, he's known to rival the best swordsman in the world. On top of that, he's the only known character that's been able to replicate Roger's divine departure just from memory. His haki alone is enough to end fights before they begin, but even against those with strong wills like Kaido, Big Mom, and Whitebeard, he's proven that with only one arm and a cutlass, he's worthy to stand shoulder to shoulder with his fellow Yonkos. We even got to see how powerful and precise his control over his haki was in Wano when he took down an Admiral Ryokogyu miles away. If that wasn't enough, Shanks even ended the fight with the Kid Pirates in one hit after witnessing what would have happened if he let Kid come near Elbaf. Yeah, well, Shanks was able to end the Marineford War just by visiting and asking nicely. We have yet to see Shanks fight in full power, but with the amount of screen time that he's had and the kind of feats the dude's accomplished, I don't think there's a lot of swordsmen that can match Shanks' presence, much less fight him, like, for real. But dude, if you think Shanks was tough, imagine how much tougher someone like him would be after decades more experience. The celestial dragons are considered gods and are almost always infallible despite committing the world's worst atrocities. However, there's an entity just below the five elders that helps keep the peace in Marijoa, and they're directly responsible for making sure that even the celestial dragons are in line, the God Knights. As the leader of the God Knights, Garling possesses incredible influence throughout the world of politics and even ascended to the ranks of the five elders when Saturn was killed during the events of Egghead Island. There's not a lot of information on St. Garling's fighting ability, but considering who he replaced in the five elders in his tenure as the leader of the God Knights, yeah, you can be sure that he's a cut above the rest. And while he is strong, our last entry is undisputed in his place on top of the swordsmen of the world. You probably saw this one coming if you know anything about One Piece. Mihawk is simply the world's strongest swordsman. No devil fruit required. And if you decide to pit the 7 warlords against each other 9 times out of 10, Mihawk will clear out the rest of them. Even among Yonkos, Mihawk rivals Shanks when it comes to swordplay. The guy only agreed to fight in the Marineford War because he was promised a fight with Whitebeard. With most of his fights effectively being one-shot KOs and him running through pirate crews because his nap was interrupted, Mihawk is a menace that sails the One Piece world alone. Even his bounty is well-deserved, being higher than his Captain Buggy. Oh, and then the matter of his sword, Yoru, being one of the 12 supreme grade swords and is permanently stained black. Yoru is a lot taller than Mihawk, and the fact that the guy can freely move that thing around like a dagger, like the amount of training that he's gone through, you can only imagine. If he can cleave apart warships with relative ease and is still able to alter the course of bullets with inch-perfect precision, then Mihawk truly deserves the title of the world's strongest swordsman.